go ahead and get started. So let's do a roll call of the commission members. Mr. Newberry.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Cohn.
Here.
Commissioner Broyles.
Here.
Commissioner Beatty.
Here.
Commissioner Deppler.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson. Chair Lee.
Present.
Councilmember Brost. Mayor Boland.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. On tonight's agenda, we have just two items. We have an old business item, and then we're doing a work session for the Town Center Update Committee. Mr. Newberry, do we have anybody online that would like to speak?
Mr. Chair, we do have several in attendance, and Mr. Garitano has indicated that he would like to speak in the chat. So I'm going to start with Mr. Garitano.
Okay, well, let's go back and we'll do the approval of the minutes first. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 16th?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. A second, Commissioner Broyles. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are approved. So Mr. Newberry, let's go ahead and do the public comment session.
I'm letting Mr. Garitano in right now. As he comes in, any others in attendance, if you would like to speak during the public comment session, please use the raise hand feature or put a message in chat and we'll let you in to address the commission.
Mr. Garitano, floor is yours.
All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak tonight on behalf of one of the Ward 8 residents, Virgil Smith, who is not, I guess, like he said, not too tech savvy. So Virgil, you recognize him probably from the meetings. He is a regular attendee and is on Crestview, which is the road right on the other side of Main Street. So the reason I am speaking on behalf of Virgil here is because he shared some concerns as you look at the Town Center Update team recommendations that maybe you can keep those concerns in mind. His property right now, there's no recommended change for that property. It's currently zoned as downtown district. It's on the north side of Crestview. He did notice that the two properties to his west are recommended to change from downtown to the neighborhood general zoning. And Virgil, his concern is that he's been there and this is property that has been in his family for many, many years, going way back. His concern is that not much really has happened in terms of what it's zoned for right now. Really, nothing has happened, and it's the downtown district. And, I guess his viewpoint, the ability to do any kind of residential, for example, like villas, is not allowed under the downtown zoning. And so that's where his concern is that, not much will happen, nothing has happened. And I understand that, downtown district is probably the one that allows the most because you have commercial, the densest form of commercial, but it may also be scaring some people away that are proposing something that's less dense. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer to this solution, but I know you're working hard on this and looking at these recommendations. And so I want you to keep that in mind because there are some homeowners who have been in that area for many, many years, and those properties there, that's their retirement plan. And so I think there was a lot of hope 25 years ago when the city was incorporated that maybe something would happen, but not really much has happened for some of them. And I think there's sometimes a little frustration. So just keep that in mind. I do have just a couple of quick comments since you are talking about town center update. The alleys, I think that's a good recommendation. I've heard that from some of the homeowners associations that they'd like to see that turned over from, to a public maintained. The priority streets, especially those streets in Center Avenue, Etherton, for example, those are good streets that I would say I'm on board with. The net district, I've been advocating for some kind of transitional type neighborhood edge transition district for years since before I came on to council. So there are some properties where I know that you're looking at that. So that could be a compromise. But again, some of them, I know that some of them mostly on the periphery, because that's where we look at, the periphery of the town center. And then that is all I've got. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, just wanted to relay those comments that I had received, and I will let you get back to your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newberry.
Mr. Chair, there's, as I said, there are some others in attendance. I gave the instruction before. I'll give it once more. If you'd like to address the commission, please use the raise hand feature. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if we just wait a few moments.
Yeah, we can.
I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything in the chat. So
We can wait another minute. Doesn't look like it. So let's move on to our one action old business, PZ 11-20. Mr. Newberry, are you reading this?
yes, sir. PZ 11-20 Monarch Fire Protection District, care of FGM Architects, Inc., 1 Metropolitan Square, Suite 1945, St. Louis, Missouri, 63102. A request for a conditional use permit in the INU non-urban residence district for a 3-acre tract of land that is located on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road at its intersection with Etherton Road. Street addresses 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road and 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road, Unit A. St. Louis County locator numbers 19W510215 and 19W510194. Proposed use, a new fire station with living quarters and associated parking areas. Public sanitary sewer service is planned to be extended to the site. Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Kunich, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it very much. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, a couple of preliminary comments relative to the draft letter of recommendation. The draft letter of recommendation contains a substantial amount of information. In the stapled portion of the draft, that is the information that's been developed by the City of Wildwood via the Department of Planning. The second stapled group of documents is that which was provided by the petitioner of the Monarch Fire Protection District in response to questions that were raised by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the months of November, December, January, and February. So from that perspective, there's a great deal of information, but I want to differentiate that the letter of recommendation contains that which was developed by the Department of Planning through its review of the petition, as well as what's required under code. Saying that, I would also note that Deputy Chief Cruz has been promoted to a panelist and is available tonight as well to speak to this matter if the chair and the commission members would like. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as each of you will recall, on February 16th, this matter came to vote before the Planning and Zoning Commission. At that time, there was a recommendation for approval of the department's information report with recommendation, which was favorable to granting the conditional use permit at this 3-acre site. The vote on that particular motion failed by a margin of 4 in favor with 5 opposed. Therefore, the conditional use permit could not be granted, and as referenced in the draft letter of recommendation, failed for a lack of majority. With that action, the Department of Planning revised the report substantially for tonight's purposes. And in that report, the department emphasized the conversations that were held between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the petitioner, the fire district. Those points emphasized the traffic concerns with Wild Horse Creek Road, particularly at State Route 109, the desire of the Planning and Zoning Commission to explore the use of the existing site, which is located on Wild Horse Creek Road, but rather on the west side of Route 109 versus this new location on the east side of it. And then finally, the department did identify conversations and questions and statements made by the commission relative to concerns relating to the site and the impact on it, as well as neighboring properties. Hopefully, as you reviewed the draft letter of recommendation, the reworking of the content was satisfactory to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Therefore, tonight, the draft letter of recommendation is in appropriate form for final action by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And with that, if there are any questions regarding the matter, the Department of Planning would be more than happy to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open this up for discussion or a motion. Not seeing anybody.
I move to approve the report as presented.
Okay, Mayor Boland, it's a motion, a second by Commissioner Helfrey. All those in favor?
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
first, if there is any discussion on the motion, and if not, I would respectfully request a roll call vote.
Okay, we will definitely do a roll call vote. Any discussion on this? At this point? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
No.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Deppler,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes?
Mayor Boland.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Mr. Newberry, are you reading the work session item into the record?
Yes, sir. Work session of the Planning and Zoning Commission on the Town Center Update Team's 24-month review of the current Town Center plan and its 5 main components, with discussion, comments, and questions encouraged on its recommended changes. These main components of the Town Center plan include the Town Center boundary map, the regulating plan, the street network map, the neighborhood design standards, and the architectural guidelines. The final action of the Planning and Zoning Commission on any or all of the recommended changes to the Town Center plan are part of a required 10-year review cycle of the city for its major planning documents, wards 1, 4, 5, 7, and 8.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich, are you leading this out?
Yes, sir. With your permission, I'll begin, and I'll try not to belabor 24 months of work and keep us here to the wee hours of the morning.
Okay.
That's my promise. First and foremost, the department appreciates your attendance tonight at the work session. Given the limited number of items, the department thought it appropriate maybe just to extend our regular meeting just a little bit to kind of go over some of the highlights of the Town Center Update team's effort over the last 24 months. Those efforts are summarized in the table that is part of the work session report that was provided to you on Friday as part of the overall agenda packet. And then I would note today that Mayor Boland requested that that table be modified to provide the rationales behind each of those particular actions. It's something that the department wish it would have thought of, but certainly a good idea is a good idea, and we were able to complete it today. Unfortunately, you just had a few hours to review it, but I think it will help tonight as we go through the items individually or collectively, and you'll have at least I think a little bit better understanding of why we ended up where we were. I also would note that Vince Loyal, who was the chair of the Town Center Update team, is a panelist, is an attendee tonight. And so if there's a desire, we can certainly promote Mr. Loyal and have him here to kind of assist in the discussion if any of the commission members would like. First and foremost, I just want to give you a bit of background. The Town Center Plan was initially adopted in February 1998. Thereafter, approximately 10 years later, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted an updated version in March of 2010. So as you can see, we're roughly on a 10-year cycle, at least when we start the process. Sometimes it takes a little longer than we anticipate, but never, unfortunately, shorter. So tonight, you are reviewing the second update of the original Town Center Plan. The original Town Center Plan attempted to employ a concept called New Urbanism for the development of this special area of the city. New Urbanism tries to, for all intents and purposes, integrate a lot of old techniques into now the 21st century. Those old techniques relate to more walkable neighborhoods, the intermingling of uses, improved architecture and materials, and design standards that, for the most part, create classic architecture as well. Saying all of that, the department, the city, and this Planning and Zoning Commission have been employing this now for almost 22 years. And through that employment, we have found things that worked well with the original plan and that didn't. And we've also found things that worked well with the update and that didn't. And so that was the charge to the Town Center Update team, to go through each part and see what works, see what doesn't, change what doesn't, and also gauge new trends. What have we seen? What's going on? What may alter what we do? For example, when the Town Center Plan was originally adopted, the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District had what would be considered very lenient standards for stormwater management. Over the years, those standards have been updated. Now the district has some of the most stringent in some regards in terms of stormwater management. That impacts development and that impacts the Town Center Plan. So those are the kinds of trends that the Town Center Update team was asked to review. There are 5 major components to the Town Center Plan. Those are the boundary, the street network, the regulating plan, which is the land use map, the neighborhood design standards, and the architectural guidelines. The Town Center Update team went through all 5 of them and thoroughly reviewed each of them. At the conclusion, they came up with a set of recommendations, and those recommendations followed the 5 major elements. Why is the Planning and Zoning Commission involved and so integral to this process? Any city that exercises the police power of zoning must have a master plan. The Town Center Plan is a subset of the city's master plan. It's specifically called out as one of the 5 conceptual land use categories. Therefore, under state statute, charter, and local code, the Planning and Zoning Commission actually adopts the plan changes, not the City Council. the city council has traditionally just endorsed and ratified. So the Planning and Zoning Commission implements the recommendations or not. So tonight we have a list of recommended changes. They start with the street network map and specifically talk about private alleys becoming public assets. It also describes what the Town Center update team believe were the 7 priority street improvements that needed to be made over the next 10 years. It went on then to adopt those in 2 phases. And with that, Mr. Chair, if there are any questions on the street network map, the department be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Bunich. I'll open it up for discussion. So anybody has any questions?
Well, I have a question, Joe. Can you help me understand what Councilman Garantano was referencing in regards to this overall plan with his constituent that had concerns about maybe developing things right outside of this perimeter?
When the land use map, and it's called a regulating plan in our town center plan. So the land use map establishes land use categories for future use of all properties in the town center. When the original town center land use map was developed by the consultant Andres Dewani, the area around Taylor Road and Route 100 was designated as the most intensive commercial area in the city of Wildwood. The intent of that was to recognize the proximity to the major arterial, State Route 100, and favorable topography, available utilities, and most importantly, zonings that had been completed by St. Louis County that were commercial in nature and kind of established the pattern for the future. The downtown district is where the B&B Theater is located, the Wildwood Hotel, Deerberg's Town Center. So Ms. Ward, that kind of gives you an idea of the intensity associated with the downtown district as a land use category. In 2008, the group of volunteers that were updating the town center plan kind of wanted to emulate Delmar Boulevard in University City, the Loop. And an analysis was done, and for the most part, that stretch of Delmar Boulevard that houses many of those restaurants, entertainment venues, et cetera, is about a 1/4 mile long. So from Deerberg's to Etherton Road along Main Street, that is roughly a 1/4 mile long. And so the downtown district was extended west of its current terminus here by City Hall to Etherton Road. The downtown district is a very accommodating category for commercial uses, but it also brings along with it a lot of requirements relative to parking, streetscape, street construction, architecture, materials, design standards. And the problem being, in many regards, is there's no good access to the area. You can't get off of Route 100 in its vicinity. Main Street hasn't been extended because it's not constructed. And now to the west, we're building a new residential area more so than anything. So I believe Mr. Schmidt's frustration is that despite almost 22 years of application, the amount of interest in that particular section of Main Street, now Crestview Drive, for downtown district type uses has been very limited. Now, saying all of that, Ms. Ward, and to the commission, if Main Street were built, I suspect the interest would spike rapidly because of better access.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. Other questions on the street network?
Yeah, Joe, isn't there an easement access issue with that stretch of road as well that will have to be identified?
Yes, nothing's easy in some parts of Wildwood. The actual road is located within a parcel of ground. And so there are multiple owners of that parcel of ground. And there's been negotiations with the current owners about the actual acquisition of that parcel of ground that's Crestview Drive by the city of Wildwood. We either can't agree upon a price, or there's just issues that arise relative to kind of backtracking and understanding the full ownership issue of that parcel of ground. So yes, it's not like a private roadway dedication or even easement, which in some instances might make it a little easier, but maybe not. But certainly a parcel of ground is a whole different kind of animal, so to speak. And John Young's done extensive research on this if you'd like to hear more.
I think it'd be good to hear that statement because it has a lot to do with our recommendations from the committee on moving the neighborhood general area to the east, which might help that situation.
And that certainly was the feeling of the volunteers, that a residential project working from the west to the east, from Etherton Road along the future Main Street towards City Hall, might actually be the impetus or trigger to get the road started, dedications, new development, and construction. And each part of that construction just makes it a little easier to make that final connection. Other questions on the street network? Well, we can always come back, but I'm going to move on next to the boundary map. So during the discussions over the 24-month period the Town Center Update team had, there was always a consistent theme about how transitions occurred along the perimeter or the boundary of the Town Center area. Several property owners, specifically at certain locations along that boundary, spoke to the Town Center Update team on multiple occasions about the fact that they're on rural properties, but they can see developments that have multiple stories of residential, high density residential and commercial. Ultimately, the group, the team, decided that they would look at certain alternatives. And if Mr. Newberry would share his screen. These were the alternatives the team started with. There was alternatives A, which included 3 locations, 1, 2, and 3, and then an alternative B. I'll immediately eliminate alternative A2. That was a property that adjoins the community college, Wildwood campus, and it's served primarily by Christie Lane or Christie Road. And the feeling amongst the team members was that given access, topography, and just being so far from the core of town center, it would not be a good addition. Alternative B was disregarded due to the fact that the team members believed that the highest and best use had been established on this set of properties, the Living Word Church and the Wildwood Middle School. And so from a perspective of current and future use, they believed, the team members believed, that it was satisfactory as is. The remaining 2 locations, 1 and 3 of alternative A, actually are being recommended to be brought into town center, but as part of a new land use classification called neighborhood edge transition. This new land use category would, for all intents and purposes, allow an increase in residential density from 1 unit for every 3 acres to 2 units for every 3 acres. The idea being that with a transition at a little greater density, that there would be more logic to the boundaries and a better approach to the use of these properties. So alternatives 1 and 3 are being recommended to be included in town center, part of its boundary, and within that new land use category, neighborhood edge transition. That category has a number of requirements associated with it to ensure, again, a higher density, but by no means a true town center density, and requirements similar to the other land use categories in terms of quality materials, appropriate architecture, environmental preservation, stormwater management, public space, and others. And I believe there's a couple more slides just to kind of give you a perspective. So this is alternative A1, and it's, as you can see, roughly 4 properties that equate to about 40 acres. To the north of it, and if Mr. Newberry would go to the next slide, to the north of it, you can see Grover Crossing. And that's a project by Greater Missouri Builders and McBride and Son Homes. Density there is about 5 to 6 units per acre. To the northeast are the eastern edge of the photograph. That is the 7 villages of Cherry Hills, and those are garden condominiums. And then a common boundary is some commercial properties, Main Street Plaza, and the Grove along Manchester Road. And so again, the team members felt that given the surrounding land use, the level topography on this upper portion of the 40 acres, availability of utilities and improved access via a stub street from Grover Crossing, the neighborhood edge transition was appropriate here. Alternative A3, and again, we're going west. It adjoins the reserve at Wildwood and the AT&T Work Center. It's bounded by Route 100, Pond Road and Manchester Road. It's inclusive of a church, a place of worship, and Happy Hounds, the private dog park. And so again, the team members felt that this was a logical extension of the current boundary to the west. It would address, again, an institutional use, a conditional use permit in the non-urban district with commercial characteristics, and allow for that larger 34-acre tract of land next to the reserve to provide better transitions between town center, suburban, and town center, rural. And here's a larger scale depiction via aerial photograph of that location. And so again, under boundary map, there are 2 additions being recommended by the Town Center Update team. And as part of that, it includes a new land use category, the NET, Neighborhood Edge Transition. And my thanks to Lindsay Marion, who came up with the name. If there are any questions, the department would be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe, thank you for the presentation. But really, I want to just most importantly take this time to thank the Town Center Update team as well, and in particular the members of this commission that served on that team for the lengthy and extensive process and the work to represent our residents and all the input that culminates in what you presented to us tonight. And thank you, Joe, for adding that extra column on the end of the sheet that had been provided to the council. I just have to the commission, I just have a couple of questions. Number one, is there anything you're looking for us to do as the commission tonight relative to what you presented, or is this just information only?
It's just informational tonight, Mr. Mayor. Any questions, any direction I receive tonight from the commission members would become part of the department's information report, which I anticipate having either at the next meeting, the second meeting in March, or certainly the first meeting in April.
Okay. Thank you. And then my second question, item 13 referenced drive-in restaurants. And the way I interpreted what you had provided, my understanding or my interpretation of that rather is that TCAT has recommended that those not be allowed in the areas presented. Is that the case?
That's absolutely correct, sir. The department offered it as an option. The town center update team rejected it, and therefore it's just been identified as something that shouldn't happen.
That's all right. Okay. And then thank you for confirming that. And then just again, to resolve something that seemed to me to be a little ambiguous, item 20, the recommendation was to change all residential housing uses within the cultural institutional district to conditional. And you indicated on the column you added, and thank you again for that the team wanted those options in this land use category, given the success of Meadows of Wildwood project at the terminus of Generations Drive. So my question is, what exactly does that mean? I interpret that to mean that any use in terms of a residential housing nature in that particular zoning classification would be conditional. But so I guess that's my first question. Is that accurate? And if that is accurate, what does that mean exactly?
It is accurate, Mr. Mayor. And I think Ms. Broyles eventually could respond to this better than I, but I'll just give you what I believe the town center update team was trying to achieve. As you recall, ERC, a developer out of the state of Arkansas, wanted to do multiple family units south of the Wildwood Family YMCA. In the current list of permitted activities in the land use categories, multiple family residences were, so to speak, permitted by right. And there was concerns that if that continued forward, or any residential use continued forward, we wouldn't have the level of scrutiny that such deserves in that unique portion of town center, where we have the Wildwood Family YMCA, the community college, a commercial center, Wildwood Square, and the Meadows of Wildwood, a successful detached villa community. So the thought is the greater level of scrutiny would probably be beneficial to ensure that if residential did come, it was appropriate for the setting.
Okay, and then just to follow,
Mayor Boland, that makes
Chairman, is there any secondary, maybe lesser way to do that would allow villas much like the Meadows of Wildwood or not allow, but would subject a development like that to lesser scrutiny versus an apartment complex? Or is it your opinion, Joe, that they all need to have that same categorical classification, that they're viewed as conditional?
I would argue they should all be conditional. And the simple reason, well, there's two simple reasons in my mind. First, the response from the neighboring communities relative to the ERC multiple family proposal, it certainly indicated that there was a substantial amount of concern about multiple family in that particular location. The second point is McBride and Son Homes did propose detached single family dwellings on the Pruitt property. And given the conditions on the Pruitt property, for all intents and purposes, they were trying to put roughly 35 home sites in an area that was so small, it just didn't work. And so typically I would say the safest approach is you make single family detached permitted, and you make it villas maybe permitted, and then you make multiple family conditional. That would be a typical approach. But here in the Cultural Institutional Overlay District, the team members just kind of felt like it just needs that extra tier of review.
Okay, fair enough. My last question, and thanks for your indulgence.
My pleasure.
Relating to the area from City Hall west to 109, as I read the recommendations, and this may already be the case, and you don't have to answer this tonight necessarily, but one of the things that I would be interested in knowing is from that, in that particular area, again, from west of City Hall, or from City Hall west to 109, which, as you know, is the, I guess, ultimately the proposed extension of Main Street, whether all of the recommendations that the TCUT has presented amount to consistency in that area in total. In other words, avoiding, to the extent possible, any aberration or outlier that could interfere with that particular area. You know, I guess what I'm saying is, it seems to me that we may want to see a zoning classification in that particular area that would allow for lack of a better word, consistency, rather than, you know, this parcel is zoned this way, and you know, the one 3 doors down is zoned that way, and so forth. And I guess I would add maybe the area being from on a north-south basis from Manchester to Highway 100. And I'm not saying that I haven't identified any issue with that. It's just that when I read the recommendations and the report, I wasn't able to fully, given the time that I had, to fully go through each one of those tentacles and look at that. And I'm sure that the team did. And again, you don't have to answer that this evening, but I would just be interested to know whether there is any type of an aberration or an outlier in that district or that area that we may want to further discuss. So that's my last question, and thanks so much for your indulgence. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I think your point's well taken. If you start at Route 109 on the west end of Main Street, you have Workplace fronting the street, then you have Neighborhood Edge, a single family district, then you go to Neighborhood General, a kind of higher density residential district, then Downtown District, and then to City Hall. So there's 4 land use categories in roughly, let's say, a half mile. So we'll take a look at it, and I'll identify anything that I think might be problematic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will say the intent of what we are proposing is to provide a transition that is not as harsh than what it was, especially at Etherton Road. So that was the concept that we came up with. And if Chair Loyal wants to speak on this, we could bring him in on this issue as well, because we did discuss this at length, you know, in the committee, with an idea that we wouldn't have single family residential tracts on the west side of Etherton and Jack in the Box or something on the east side of it. So that was the concept. Mayor Boland. Then I'll come back to Commissioner Ward.
No, I was just giving a thumbs up to that's awesome, and thank you all so much for doing that. So.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, being new on the committee, do we look at traffic impact with the new proposed categories? Do we ever look at road capacity, traffic impact?
Yes, Commissioner Ward. Prior to the start of the update of the town center plan, the Planning and Zoning Commission spent about a year, maybe a little less than 12 months, engaging, reviewing, and discussing the town center traffic analysis that was done by H.R. Green, a private consultant to the city. And what H.R. Green was asked to do is to look at town center, the recommended land use categories, and what those land use categories might allow under, let's say, optimum conditions, and then tell us what roads needed to be upgraded, what roads were fine as is, and again, to do it for a short-term window and a 20-year window. And so that was the basis of our discussion regarding the street network. And out of that analysis done by H.R. Green and then the discussions held by the Town Center Update team, that's how we came to the conclusion that those 7 roads that were identified as priorities are ones that may not necessarily be overwhelmed by vehicular traffic, but have certain characteristics that need to be improved for either vehicular safety, pedestrian safety, or just because of certain stormwater issues or stacking problems, things like that. So yes, we used an analysis done by a competent traffic engineering firm to base everything that came out of the Town Center Update team in terms of recommendations.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Have to get unmuted here. Commissioner Cohn.
Yeah, my comment is about adding in alternative A1 and the recommendation for neighborhood traditional edge. I think that that's really too restrictive, and I'd like to see us consider a higher density than 1 house per 1.5 acres. The property owners have made some good arguments to have us think in that direction, and I just wanted to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for that input, and I'll, as part of any report, I'll go through different scenarios for each of you.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Thank you, Chair Lee. My question is for you, Mr. Vinich. Are we going to go through each of these groups, each of the 5 areas, or are we just going to kind of make general comments? Because I have comments on several different areas, but I don't want to jump the gun.
Well, Commissioner Helfrey, we kind of talked about the boundary map, for the most part, the regulating plan, and kind of jumped into the land use categories, which only leaves the design standards and architectural guidelines. And I wasn't planning on spending much time on the architectural guidelines, given again, there were no changes recommended by the Town Center Update team.
Okay, then if it's appropriate, if it's okay with you, I have just a few comments I wanted to make on a couple different items. Would that be all right? Okay. So first of all, I just had a couple notes. The alleys, we had all talked about, and that was very good in the Town Center meeting. The neighborhood edge transition, we were all thought that was brilliant. As far as the property that Mr. Cohn just talked about, A1, I will tell you my personal opinion on that is that it is zoned, that if we do it the way it is recommended right now, to put it into the neighborhood edge transition, my personal opinion of it is that that is a good zoning area for it because of the topography of the land. And so that's all I'll say about that. The things that I really wanted to talk to were 2 things that I have big thoughts on. One is the drive-throughs. So the Town Center Update Committee, we were in a unique position because when we started all of this, it was pre-COVID pandemic. And then as we finished this all up, we were in the heat of the height of the pandemic and lockdowns and so forth. And at the beginning, when we were pre-pandemic, we talked about the drive-throughs, and it was pretty split on people wanting drive-through, not wanting drive-throughs. And ultimately, the conversation at that time was the majority said no drive-throughs. And then the pandemic hit, and we saw a lot of businesses struggle where they might have done better had they had access to a drive-through. And then when the city of Wildwood sent out the survey for the Town Center Update, when they did the survey for people to voice their opinions on, we had almost 800 responses. And if you look at the response for drive-throughs for restaurants, I read it as it's still pretty divided. However, it leans more towards allowing drive-throughs. And so my opinion is this. I personally think that we should allow drive-throughs in the downtown district along Manchester Road because we're at the planning and zoning, and we can control how they look. We can say you have to have the drive-through at the back of your property, or if it doesn't fit on your property because you don't have enough parking. I think the scary thing for people is when you say drive-through, they think of that double bright yellow drive-through for McDonald's. And I will just tell you, that's just what I've heard people say. When you look at the numbers on that for the drive-throughs, people, it's kind of all over the place. So I would just like, as a group, for all of us to give that some serious consideration. The next thing is in the setbacks. Let's see. Okay, it goes back to the neighborhood design standards, and on the list it's number 22, and it says requiring front access to garages to be a minimum of 15-foot setback distance from the dwellings in the neighborhood general district. That was pretty unanimous with the town center update committee, and it's on page 35 of that study, and 62% of the people said that they wanted the minimum of 15-foot setbacks for garages. So I would like for us to look at that and make sure that that is what we want to do. And then, because I don't know if the Reserve or Accolade Place, if that is how they presented their stuff there. And then the last thing was the multifamily. It was a question. My question is, where do we have in the city of Wildwood that is undeveloped still in the town center that allows for multifamily apartments or whatever? Because at the very beginning of the town center update committee, there were some people who came to the group and said, we're concerned because people that are just starting out, right out of college, may not have a place to live in Wildwood. They may have to leave Wildwood in order to afford to come back to Wildwood. So my question is, where are those places allowed? And so I think that's it. Alleys, neighborhood edge transition, 15-foot setbacks for garages, multifamily question, and I think we should have drive-throughs. Okay, thank you so much.
And just to answer the last question, the neighborhood general would allow multiple family residences, as well as potentially the downtown district over commercial, utilizing the airspace above the first floor for multiple family. So the darker, almost black color is neighborhood general, and the downtown is kind of the, I can't say, bronze color.
But okay, but so realistically, the brown on the other side, on the north side of 100, the vast majority of that is developed. Is that correct?
Well, if Mr. Dewberry would go to the next map, I think it'll show another one, please. If you could keep going, Mr. Newberry, I'll tell you when to stop. There it is. Nope, next one. Go on. Nope, next. Keep going, please. Keep going.
That's
There it is. So yeah, as you can see, this is the one TCUT recommended in terms of a new regulating plan. And the major change was at Etherton Road and Main Street or Crestview Drive. We added neighborhood general there.
Right. And then you're stating that in the red area is where multifamily can be.
Actually, the more bronze color, the downtown district.
That's commercial, isn't it?
Yes, but again, if the first floor was commercially orientated, additional floors above that could be multiple family type units, such as the prime.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Councilman Brost.
Yeah, I've just one question for the two parcels going in to, I guess, 1.5 acre density. Are there any other impacts to the properties moving them into town center other than just the density change?
Well, the density change, Councilmember Brost, I would see as a positive from the perspective of the property owners. But along with that transition or transfer into the town center boundary, there will be greater architectural requirements. expected with the dwellings themselves.
So that compares to like out where I'm at on 3-acre density, there's really, the architectural requirements are just within the subdivision.
That's correct. But in this case, we would follow the town center architectural guidelines, which just, again, after the effort of the Architectural Review Board, talk about quality materials, appropriate colors, and just, kind of nothing too crazy in terms of designs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Commissioner Beatty.
Thank you. A couple comments. First, I tend to agree with Commissioner Cohn about the density. I mean, I appreciate the transition area, but to me, 1.5 acre lots is still less than suburban, even since our suburban density is 1 acre lots. And I don't know, it seems weird to be in town center, even though it's a transition area, but still less dense than all of the suburban subdivisions to the north and east of the town center. So I don't know, to me, if we're going to call it town, like a neighborhood edge transition, like maybe 3/4 acre lot or 1/2 acre lots, those are still pretty big lots. I mean, there's a lot of older homes in Baldwin, say, was it near Westridge Elementary School behind the Baldwin Post Office and the Schnooks there. Those are pretty, I mean, it's not rural, but those are 1/2 acre or bigger lots, and they're pretty big lots even. And then I also agree with Commissioner Helfrey on the drive-throughs, especially, I don't know, something, drive-through restaurants would be weird to me on Old Manchester, but I think they're perfectly suited for the lots on 109. Because I feel like those lots are going to sit vacant for years and years more if we don't allow something like drive-through restaurants in along there. So those are my thoughts, and I may have other comments later.
Mayor Boland.
Thank you. Just a question. The area that Commissioner Cohn referred to, Joe, where specifically is that in layman's terms?
Joe, you're muted.
I think.
My apologies.
That's all right.
It's south of Manchester Road and east of Woods Road. And so it's Vinrock Kennels. That's principally the property, and south of Main Street Plaza and Grover Crossing.
So can you use, the arrow or something, or Travis, to show where this is for everyone who's watching? Because I have a feeling if I have to ask that question, there are probably a lot of other people that may need to know that. So
if Mr. Newberry can find the aerial. So if Mr. Newberry, would you identify CrossFit Wildwood, the old City Hall area? So that's the original City Hall site.
okay.
And then Main Street Plaza, which is the commercial building right there. And then Grover Crossing is next to it. And so there's, I apologize, there's 5 properties that form that. The westernmost property is the Vinrock Kennels, a commercial dog boarding facility that was approved by St. Louis County back in the 1970s.
Okay, where is that? I'm not, the arrow's
the
moving
west-
all over, right
Yeah,
there.
there you are.
So
Thank
that is the area specifically that TCUT recommended to be 1.5 acres, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what ward is that? 8 or 6?
It's 8.
Okay. All right. And then a question for Commissioner Helfrey. She had mentioned the setbacks for front entry garages, and I didn't understand whether she was advocating that they be what's called for or more or less. And so I just wanted to find out from her what her position was on that.
Thank you, Mayor. My position is that we should have the garages set back 15 feet from the front of the house, which is what it is what it is in town center. And TCUT addressed that specifically. I don't know that it was necessarily had to do with any one property, but when we were going through all the neighborhood design standards, that came up, and it was decided that all garages should have a 15-foot setback from the front of the house. So I want to make sure that that is addressed in any properties that we have. And I know that we had, the Eckerlier Reserve had come in front of this board a while ago, and I wanted to make sure that that met the design standards that were in place before and what TCUT is recommending. Okay.
Okay, so the 15-foot setback is your point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, going through the chair here, is your point that you want to, number one, you're okay with that, and number two, you want to make sure that what's now proposed as the reserve adopts that? Is that what you're?
It should be that way.
Okay.
And you would have to ask I would have to defer to Mr. Vunich, because he's the expert in all things Wildwood, on what it requires now for garage setbacks in downtown Wildwood. I mean, I didn't go back and look up all the documents, and I guess I probably should have, and I apologize to everyone for that. But I think that as it stands right now, that the garages are supposed to be set back from the front of the house by a certain amount. I think it's 15 feet, but I'm not positive.
Joe, is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Helfrey is correct. The current neighborhood design standard says 15 feet, but practically speaking, the standard has been about 4 to 6 feet.
Okay. Well, I would support the 15-foot for sure.
So just to be clear, we're talking about setbacks from the front, not from the house.
Right.
So what you're stating is not quite correct. You're saying front of the house, where you wouldn't have a garage 15 feet back from the front.
Right. Well, I'm sorry. The word in here says from the front of the dwelling.
And actually, that is correct. The intent is when you drive on the street to see the front of the house, the door, the windows, not necessarily the extension of the garage and the garage doors as the first thing. So what we're doing is we're asking the development community, the builders, to flip it and push the house front and the garage behind versus garage front, house behind.
Houses like mine. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Mr. Beatty?
I said we need more houses like mine with the garages behind the house.
So
Well,
maybe before this comes in front of us all to vote on, and I will look it up myself, and maybe we can find out exactly what it states right now, and then compare it to what it's being suggested, because I'm pretty sure they're very, very similar, and then making sure that it's applied to everything.
And I think I support what you're saying. I just want to be sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
The
Sorry
last
for-
thing I want to, I have two things remaining, if I may. Number
go ahead.
one, relative to the drive-throughs, the drive-through restaurants. You know, when I became mayor in 2016, I never thought I would have to break a tie, because I did the statistical analysis. You have 16 council members, and what's the chance, and historically, how many times had that happened? Not many. So what's the chance of that? And within about 60 days, I had to break a tie, and it was on the Pond Grover Loop. And I couldn't believe that that was happening. And it was not only happening, but it was happening on a very big issue. And I gave a statement that night as to why I voted against it. And there were several reasons, but one of the main reasons that I voted against it was because, number one, it was an incredibly big issue for our city, a very expensive issue, and something that was very different. And number two, it was very divisive. I felt like if there wasn't a fairly large majority in favor of doing that, then until there was, the answer should be no. And so to the statistics, and I'll take it for what's been presented tonight relative to the survey results on drive-throughs, assuming all that is correct, that it is relatively equal, because that is a big change for our city and is definitely different, I would strongly recommend against it until the point in time it becomes something, if it ever does, and I don't know that it will, that is more desirable and wanted by our residents. If it were a lesser issue, of consequence, maybe, but given that that would be a significant change, and given what TCUT has done, and given the survey results that are not overwhelming one way or the other, I think the best approach would be to take a conservative approach, and that would be to follow the recommendation and to not allow those. Lastly, and Joe, I know we've talked about this before, but for those of us who are significantly colorblind and not able to really understand or assess any of the colors that have been presented in that map, since it is such and we have a lot of these, and I know you do your best because there are only so many options, but on this particular one, because it is so important, the town center update plan, I would ask if there's any way to crosshatch, use asterisks or other things to show what those various zones are, that we please do that so that people who cannot see what colors are there can determine what's being presented. If there's any way. If there isn't, then so be it. But if there is, I would ask that we please do that. Thank you.
There is an approach to use, and my apologies. I should have thought of that.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Broyles. Hey, you're on mute still.
Mr. Beatty is before me.
Commissioner Beatty.
Okay, just as a counterpoint to the mayor on the drive-throughs, I totally understand what you're saying. But when I go to drive by Starbucks on a Saturday morning or at 3 in the afternoon and see that drive-through wrapped around onto Plaza Drive, I mean, we have the drive-throughs in the city, and I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I think it's backwards that the drive-throughs are downtown, because that's supposed to be the area of the city that's most pedestrian friendly, and not out on 109 where it's more auto oriented. So I don't, that's just my thought. I mean, to me, there should be very little parking in the downtown area and lots of buildings, and with all of the, like with the drive-throughs and the big parking lots, I don't know that we'll ever build a city again without much parking, which was always kind of my hope and dream. But I think 109 would be a better spot for the Starbucks and Bread Company than by Deerberg's. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so I'll go to Commissioner Broyles.
Thank you, Chair Lee. I was on the committee, the TCUT committee, for 2 years. Without the few months that we had COVID in the very beginning. And this drive-through was discussed at length. And I'm one of the committee members that voted no for certain areas. But Joe, could you tell me about the drive-through that's been out of business in front of Schnucks? And what is the possibility that that will be a drive-through one of these days, which I'm not opposed to having it there, that one? Or would that end up being a restaurant of some kind?
Well, much to the surprise of the city, what we thought was a successful Jack in the Box location ultimately closed. It was explained to me in a roundabout way that the reason for the closure was not necessarily the sales at the particular location, but the fact it was difficult to find help or employees. And so they were always struggling to have people available to work, the extended hours associated with fast food restaurants. The second part of your question, yes, it could stay a fast food restaurant with a drive-through facility. That particular site-specific ordinance was approved by St. Louis County, and it authorized such. And the city of Wildwood has always retained it as part of that site-specific ordinance. So yes, it could be reused by someone else.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on these topics?
I feel like the getting the restaurant workers is a problem with all of our restaurants locally.
That's what's been explained to me by our economic development manager, Mr. Jacquin, that it's just difficult finding individuals that will work that type of particular job. But as I say, that's what was explained to me. There may be a million other reasons, but that's what I had heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen the Taco Bell at Old State closed at hours that you would not expect Taco Bell to be closed at least from when I was a teenager. I mean, that was always open till 2 a.m, and I'll drive by there at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday night and it's dark.
Mr. Lee, I believe Mr. Cohn had his hand raised.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was just going to say that if we had affordable housing, we could probably find more people to work at Taco Bell or Jack in the Box.
Joe, one thing you might mention is the site topography in the neighborhood edge transitionals 1A that we were discussing that Mayor Boland had the question on. I think we kind of determined that only about half of that property can even be developed with our Wildwood slope criteria. So that limited that site from that aspect, regardless of whether we leave it as 3 acre or make it smaller. There's only going to be so much developed area allowed on that site.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I mentioned that the tract was approximately 40 acres. The southern 20 acres of it, though, is off the ridge and drops dramatically from that ridge down to the south, following the terrain of Woods Road. The idea is that the 40 acres could be included, and that the front 20 acres, which was relatively usable and had less topographic constraints, we could shift some of the acres to the north, some of the units to the north, and preserve all of the acreage to the south. Other questions, comments?
I guess I do have one other thing.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner B, and I'll come back to Mayor Boland.
Okay. Looking at that, while you've got that map up that's up right now, or never mind, I guess this is on my agenda. If you look at those tracks near the Old Pond School, there's a mixture of workplace, neighborhood edge, and neighborhood general, all on those 5 tracks, it looks to be. Did the committee give any thought to unifying that a little more?
We did look at that area, Commissioner. The feeling is that at least one of those tracks kind of anchors the northwest quadrant of the Route 109 Manchester Road intersection. Mm-hmm. And then as you went west, we have a strong institutional pattern on the south side of the street, the Old Pond School on the north side, and now the reserve plan as well. So it does look maybe a tad bit disjoint, but I think it's premised more on the existing land use and in the area.
Okay, because yeah, there, unless I'm looking at the wrong map here, there's a little bit of neighborhood general at the northwest edge of that, but I don't know that it's a big enough. Yeah, it seems out of place out there, the neighborhood general.
What we found in instances like that, it usually just allows a little bit greater density for detached units, not necessarily multiple family or attached. But a key point is with the neighborhood general, you can do villas and you can do detached and attached ones. So it's a nice category to have in conjunction with single family, the neighborhood edge, because it may allow for a variety of housing choices within a single project boundary.
Yeah, or and then I get like that the corner lot, it's mostly workplace, but should we, I guess all I'm saying is, should we unify that based on the lot lines that are currently existing?
And that's a good question. We debated this back in 1996 about how do you kind of transition these? Do you follow hard and fast existing boundary lines, or do you do it more on topography and things along those natures, drainage patterns? And so I'll take a look at that and either provide you the logic or a recommendation for change.
Okay, sounds good.
Mayor Boland?
Thank you. Once again, I just want to say thanks so much to all of the people on the TCUT and Chair Loyal, who is with us tonight, for particularly being part of that, and those of you who were part of it. And I think the fact that we have had so much, I mean, number one, that this is such an important issue, and number two, that it has gone on for, as it should, for an extensive time to get all the input and so forth. And then number three, to arrive before us this evening with the excellent questions that we've had, but frankly have not been a lot, given the task at hand, speaks very well for what has been done. And so thanks to everyone again. Appreciate it very much.
Mr. Vunich, it might be worth discussing the use categories, because we made some modifications to that as well, you know, to ease this transition as with the zoning standards. I don't know if you were going to go into that next or what, but it sounds like that would be a good transition.
Maybe I'll conclude with that and then allow any further questions or comments. The regulating plan, as I've described, is the land use map. And there are certain land use categories associated with the regulating plan. For each of those land use categories, there's a list of uses, either permitted by right or conditional. The Town Center Update team looked at these very closely. We've talked a lot about the drive-through restaurant or fast food restaurants with drive-throughs, but they also did several other considerations. One, they took all of the kind of generic terms for public space, open space, scenic areas, the wildlife refuges, and combined them as one. Secondly, they expanded research laboratories and facilities, acknowledging that offices, these types of offices, have daytime populations, which oftentimes are sorely missing in Wildwood. Daytime populations in normal times go out to eat lunch, shop before they go to work, shop after work, so they're good for the business community. Also, kind of an odd one, stores, shop, and open air markets, they were not necessarily identified in the commercially orientated land use categories. Now they are identified and completely contained. The Town Center Update team removed multiple family and single family attached from the neighborhood edge, the existing single family category. Again, just wanting to assure residents of Town Center and others outside Town Center that there is in Town Center just a single family detached district. Bed and breakfasts were given pretty much carte blanche in all residential categories. And then finally, the change to the cultural institutional overlay district, making any type of residential use from the most intense multiple family to the least single family conditional in nature.
Mayor Boland.
I just want to mention, we do have a comment from a resident, Mr. Bosworth, who's asking about the prospect of changing the parcel west of the new city park. I'm assuming that refers to the parcel west of City Hall, to neighborhood general versus leaving it downtown. And I think that that question would be encompassed by my earlier question to Joe, that he's going to get back to us on relative to consistency and so forth for that entire area, north of Manchester, south of Highway 100, west of City Hall, and east of 109. But I just want to make sure that we've acknowledged that comment. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, that will be one of the properties I will investigate and provide you some additional information. So to you and Mr. Bosworth, yes, we'll take a look at that. Any other questions or comments? Well, you've given Mr. Newberry and I a good list to look at and to kind of do some research. If there are no other questions or comments, I just want to say thank you. It was a very productive hour or more, and I appreciate the input. I think you've refined some of the thoughts of the Town Center Update team and given us some new ideas to kind of think about before we make a final action. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Commissioner Helfrey.
I just want to take a moment just to say thank you very much for everything that you, Joe and Travis and everyone else behind the scenes does for us. It's been an honor to serve on planning and zoning, and it was really an honor to serve on the TCUT and to meet so many people and to see such a large group work together as a team. But we could not have done it all without you all, and it would never have been as smoothly done had it not been for your expertise. So I really do want to say thank you very much.
Well, as you know, Commissioner Helfrey, it was a team effort. Terry Gaston, Kathy Arnett, both of who are no longer with the city, Mr. Newberry, and many others that did some typing, did the maps, all the things that are behind the scenes. And I'll make sure they know that you said thank you.
I also want to thank Chief Loyal, Chair Loyal. He did an excellent job with this, and maybe you can hoodwink him into another city position here. If there aren't any other comments, we're ready for the adjournment. So I'll let everybody have a moment if they want, and then we'll go ahead and close the meeting. Seeing nothing, I'll need a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Broyles, a second by Commissioner Beatty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.